everybody, welcome to Locker Room. This is Southland's podcast for men where we read demons, conversations, talk about the right things in the right ways. My name is Scott Hatfield, and it's an honor that you come and check out this podcast. And this podcast is about helping men find and pursue a relationship with Jesus and read demons, conversations, to challenge men to go and lead, to go make a difference and fight for the most important things. And I wanted to shout out the Locker Room groups that are meeting at our campuses, all over our campuses. And if you're interested in starting a group or joining a group, you can go to southland.church/groups, and you can sign up or start a Locker Room men's group. I also want to remind you about our women's podcast, Tell Me More. First episode dropped September 11th. I know that there's some ladies that listen, and so I wanted to go ahead and make sure that you are on the lookout, and also men, that you would encourage the women in your lives to check it out. It's going to be a great resource for women. I also want to give you a heads up on the parenting podcast. I know we mentioned that in the preview episode. We're actually going to release those at the beginning of 2024, and I'll give you a heads up as we get closer to it. But really pumped about our guest today. He's back by popular demand. He's a man that I have so much respect for. He's a veteran on this podcast, a warrior filled with wisdom and some great stories. He's one of the favorite people that I have to talk to, and he is one of one, irreplaceable. Locker Room, welcome back. He's back, Gary Black.
Thank you, sir.
How are you, buddy?
Hey, you need to tell my wife all that stuff.
Does she need to be reminded of who you are?
I'm not sure she sees it that way.
Is that right?
I'm great. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, man. When I told JR and Zach that you were coming, JR just simply sent an image of Ron Swanson. I don't know if he is, but he's on Parks and Rec, and he's just going like this. Yes. So you're loved around here, man, and I'm glad to have you back. You've been on a bunch before I jumped onto this, but you and I talked last season's episode. We unpacked this one called Your Enemy. We talked about Satan and demons, and it was a good one. And it's one of those things where I know that you've talked about Satan and demons so much, and I was like, man, I promise you we're going to do something else. And so last time you were on, you got to tell us a little bit about your story growing up, and even how you got to church, and even your calling into ministry. But even, it's funny because, there's a lot of things I know about you, but I don't know everything about you. And you were telling me about your first time going to youth group. And after it was over, you were going to get on your motorcycle, by the way, which is awesome, that you had a motorcycle back then in high school. And then this girl follows you out, and she goes, I just want you to know I'm really glad that you came today. I don't know if she was on the guest X team for youth group. But
I think so, maybe.
But then she reached out to you and gave you a kiss. First time in church, man. I mean, all the single dudes are going, dude, how do I get that, you know?
It wasn't a holy kiss either.
Sure. And that wasn't your wife, but eventually you meet your wife in the church choir, which I didn't know that you were in the church choir, which is pretty awesome. But and then you talked about your calling into ministry, which I think is really, really cool. There's so many people that are wrestling just with what God's calling them to do, and some with vocational ministry, and I think that was neat to be able to talk about that. And if you didn't hear last season's episode on Your Enemy, do yourself a favor and go check that out. And so just in real time, we just had a staff meeting last week in Georgetown, and all of our staff get together. We do it, like 5 times a year, and our staff got to celebrate you for being on staff for 30 years. And I went nuts because I'm like, Gary Black, so I just wanted to congratulate you publicly on Locker Room for 30 years, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
What thoughts or emotions come to mind? You've had a million roles. We talked about that, but just as you're thinking about that, I mean, it's probably a million things as you're walking up to be celebrated, but I'm sure there's a million things that come to mind as you think about this place.
Well, I can't believe how fast it's gone by.
Yeah.
And I don't take any of it for granted. Life's a gift. Yeah. We should enjoy all of it.
Right.
But the other thing that comes to mind is just gratitude.
Yeah.
To work in a place like Southland.
Yeah.
Every morning for years, I drive to the office. I always think this is a get-to, not a have-to.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just a privilege to work in a place like this with a team like this.
Absolutely.
I don't ever take it for granted.
No. I say this a lot. We get to do this.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
Leave a service or leave an event, leave a group, and I'm just blown away that we get to do this. You told me yesterday that I think you said are you 69? Is that what you are?
Yeah.
Dude, I just want to drink whatever you're drinking. I mean, as long as it's legal. But you were telling me that your grandson asked you a question. I know this is not our notes, but what did he say to you the other day?
Gee, Paul, are you going to die soon?
what did you say to him?
I said, well, why do you ask?
Yeah.
And he said, well, I mean, you're 69.
Yeah.
And I said, well, here's what I want you to know, Asher.
Yeah.
I said, I'm ready to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm ready to go to heaven anytime.
Yeah.
But I said, I want to be around, see you graduate high school and
Yeah.
some other stuff. So
Yeah.
I'm going to do my best to stay healthy, hopefully.
How old is Asher?
8.
8. Okay. I mean, isn't it funny how you just think 69 feels forever, and but then you live life, it just goes so fast, and it's like, wow, it just goes so quickly.
The other thing he said, I didn't tell you the other day, he said, well, I'm glad I'm 8 because I got a long way to go.
Hopefully so. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, just give us a quick recap about your family. You got a wife. How long you been married? You got kids. You got some kids.
Well, Linda is hands down the finest human being I've ever met.
Yeah.
No question about that.
She's pretty awesome.
Met her in high school. We dated 3 years, got married. We celebrated our 49th anniversary July 27th.
That's
so
awesome.
Next year's the big 5-0.
So you were 20 when you got married?
Yeah.
Man, you were a young pup.
I was a young buck, as I used to say.
Had it all figured out, didn't you?
Yeah, I knew.
You knew who you were marrying. You had it all
there was
figured
no
out.
doubt in my mind. But
Yeah.
So anyway, kids and grandkids. 2 kids, John, daughter-in-law Lauren, and Julie, son-in-law Isaac.
Yeah.
John's in real estate here in Lexington. Julie runs a little online business called handsfreevirtual.com.
Oh, cool.
Shout out to Julie.
There you go.
In Phoenix. When the kids were growing up, I told them all I really cared about as far as school was that they read widely and write well.
Gotcha.
And both of them.
That's good.
Both of them do that, and they've achieved that. And I'm happy for all that they do with their lives. I have a grandson, as I mentioned, named Asher.
Yeah.
He's 8 going on 14. Every Sunday we spend time together. A couple of weeks we went to the gorge.
Cool.
And did the zip lining. He got stuck out in the middle 2 times.
By himself?
Yeah, he's 70 pounds. Weight limit was 70 pounds.
Oh, gosh.
And but he said, hey, it was fun, Paul. I wasn't afraid.
Yeah.
So he's hanging 350 feet above the ground.
He got stuck out in the middle twice?
Yeah, they had to, reel him in however they did it. So.
Were you going, great.
Yeah.
This is on me.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So anyway, every Sunday we spend time together.
That's cool.
In the afternoons. He calls it Boys' Day Sundays. And we recently went this past weekend actually to Battle Axes of Lexington.
Battle Axes? Oh, yeah.
Where they throw axes. And they have zip lining and shoot pool and all that kind of stuff. So it's a cool place, by the way. But
awesome.
Bottom line, I love my family and I'm blessed.
That's awesome. I want to ask you some random questions today, just because we're just recapping this, and they can go check out the rest of it in the other episode. But random questions, all right? Here's the first one. Best vacation you ever been on? What was it? What'd you do? Where'd you go?
Well, the best vacation I've ever been on was my honeymoon.
Okay. All right. Where'd you go? What'd you do?
We went to Gatlinburg.
Gatlinburg. Nice.
Got a hotel right there next to the Space Needle.
Nice. Okay.
And anyway, best vacation I've been on. And close second would be the trip to Israel I took in 1992.
Okay. Very cool.
Changed the way I understood the Bible. Exceptional, life-changing trip in every way.
Yeah.
And then recently, trips to Watercolor and Seaside, Rosemary Beach in Florida down in 30A.
Okay.
With the whole family last few years. Fabulous. My son pays for it all.
Nice.
Which, of course, makes it especially enjoyable for me.
That's really kind.
But both my kids have the gift of generosity.
That's cool.
Especially John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, last movie or show or video, whatever it is that you can remember that you got watery.
Got watery.
Works happen. You start crying.
Well, I don't.
Is there a certain movie? Or
I don't see a lot of movies,
Yeah.
but when I do, I usually take my grandson.
Yeah.
And so the last movie I cried at was Lyle Lyle Crocodile.
Lyle Lyle Crocodile. What happened?
It's a kid's movie.
Okay.
Oh, he was the kid's pet, and then he got captured, and they took him to the zoo. And,
Okay.
I got a little teary
Yeah.
on that. And so anyway, I might have just been calculating how much the popcorn and Cokes and everything cost. during that scene. I
Crushing
don't
your
know.
pocketbook, yeah.
But
no doubt.
Lyle Crocodile would be first, and then maybe there were a couple of scenes in Super Mario Brothers
Yeah,
that were a little sad.
unexpected. Huh?
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
what I do these days. I take him to movies. So
That's awesome.
can't remember beyond that.
Yeah. You ever fall asleep during them?
No.
Buddy,
No.
I can, those new chairs and all these
Oh,
places,
yeah,
buddy,
yeah.
I can get,
Lean back.
I can just
relax.
doze out.
Yeah.
I may just swing over there and get a nap today. It doesn't matter what I'm watching.
There you go.
Here's a question: if you could meet anyone dead or alive, right, not Jesus, right? We'll take Jesus. I mean, we know Jesus, but I mean, in
Yeah.
person.
Gotcha.
If you could meet anyone dead or alive for an hour, who would it be, and why would you choose them?
C.S. Lewis. His writings changed my life. Mere Christianity.
Yeah,
His book, my favorite book of his.
yeah,
You know, he taught me that you don't have to put your brain in a closet
yeah.
to be a Christian.
Right.
And I didn't know that until I read his writings.
Yeah.
So he gave me logical reasons for believing what I believe about God, the Bible, Jesus.
Skeptic from the very beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Yeah.
know.
So yeah, he's the guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Here's a question. It's just open ended. What's something that most people don't know about you?
Well, probably a lot.
Yeah.
But I think I love physical labor. I
Okay.
love building things.
Yeah.
Built my fence, built the pergola in my house, built the deck. Fairly decent mechanic. I've had
Yeah.
2 motorcycles in my life.
Okay.
Most recently, I had a Honda Goldwing.
Okay.
I was driving to Cincinnati on that and almost got hit
Oh gosh.
and going 75 miles an hour. And
Oh man.
I went home that day and decided I was going to sell my
Yeah.
my Goldwings. Sure enough,
Yeah.
and I did.
Was that was your second motorcycle?
Yeah.
Because the one you had in high
Yeah.
school.
Some
Yeah.
preacher over in Danville, not one of our churches, but
Yeah.
came over and bought it.
Gotcha.
But I don't know, fairly decent mechanic. Restored a couple of Volkswagen Beetles.
Really?
Had 3 at one time.
You still have any?
No,
No.
I sold them.
Gotcha.
Taught at Asbury for 9 years as an adjunct professor in communications.
What'd you teach?
So,
Communications.
Yeah. Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yes. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
So.
Professor. Should I be
Yeah,
calling you
well,
doctor?
they call me doctor.
Yeah.
And I told them I don't have a doctor's degree.
Sure.
They,
Right.
everybody else there does.
Sure.
Well, I'm Dr. Black.
Yeah, that's right.
So I still keep up with some of those kids.
That's
and
cool.
they with me, and I loved it.
Gotcha.
I love college kids. If you can't teach at Asbury, you can't teach anywhere.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that cool?
They're the best.
That's awesome. That's awesome. There's some rare things about you that I've just picked up along the way
Oh, boy.
that you didn't tell me about. But I've learned that you challenge yourself to figure out different things along the way, and let's just see if any of these are true. Okay, the first one I learned that you learned how to pick locks. Did you learn how to pick locks?
Yeah, I did about probably 20 years ago.
Okay.
But
Why did you learn how to do that?
well, I saw a video or 2 about it, and I thought, I could do that if I had the right tools.
Yeah.
So I started out with paper clips.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
a good way to learn.
Okay.
But and then I had a few little tools that I bought. But you get into it big time when
Do you?
when you get into being a locksmith. It's
Swinging by the bank late at night.
yeah. So it's But I used to be able to. I haven't tried to. If I locked myself out of the house, I could get back in.
You could get in.
Well, not now,
Oh,
probably,
okay.
but back then I
Yeah.
could. But yeah,
Man, like
it's not that complicated.
like a secret agent.
Yeah, just enjoy that kind of stuff.
I also learned that you learned how to hotwire a car. Is that right?
Yeah, I could do that back in the day.
Was that before Jesus? Is that what that was?
Well, I just, I worked in cars, and back in those days, you had, cars had a starter relay and
Yeah.
a battery and a starter, and you could cross the terminals on the starter relay and
Okay.
get things started. So, anyway,
You're like Jason Bourne, man.
yeah, well,
This is what you say you do. And then,
Yeah.
and that night you.
in
Go
today's
somewhere.
cars, I wouldn't have a clue.
Sure. All right, this one's coming out of left field, and people are going to go, "What? You also learn how to ride a unicycle? Is that right? Is that true?"
Yeah, well, people call me a clown, so I thought I may as well ride a unicycle. But no, I did, and the
Okay.
reason I started riding it
Yeah.
is one of my best friends, Tommy, lived in
Okay.
the subdivision.
Okay.
He could ride the thing all over the subdivision.
That doesn't look easy, man.
No. And so I asked him if I could borrow it maybe and get some pointers. And
Yeah.
he loaned it to me for about 6 weeks, and I kept trying until I could do it.
Did you? I mean, it looks like if you didn't do this right, you could fall pretty hard. Did you?
Oh, yeah.
Did you take
Yeah.
some shots?
Yeah. In
Did
fact,
you?
if you're going to learn to ride a unicycle, you should learn how to fall first.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's the one thing he told me.
Yeah.
But
Did you fall forward or backward? Really?
well, yeah, you just let the bike go and get on your feet.
I got you.
You don't try to, but fall correctly.
Yeah.
There's some principle there for
Yeah.
surviving difficulties in life. But once you learn how to fall correctly, you just practice until you can feel the sweet spot
Yeah.
in balancing, and then you just
Yeah.
pedal.
And then you can
You know,
pedal.
and I fell several times. Once I fell so hard backwards that I busted both elbows. They were bleeding
Oh, gosh.
profusely.
Yeah.
Hit the back of my head, but put my elbows out first.
Yeah. Right.
And I
So
went
you
in the
bust your
house
head.
and said, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done with this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this. And I sat in there for about 15 minutes nursing my wounds.
Yeah.
And then I said, well, I can't quit now.
Yeah.
You know,
Almost there.
I'm almost there. So, yeah, I got back on it, pedaled down the driveway, pedaled 100 feet down the road,
Yeah.
and I was in. So,
That's awesome.
but if I would have quit, I would have quit too soon, and maybe
Yeah.
there was a principle there.
Yeah.
Can't win if you quit.
We quit too easy
Yeah,
sometimes.
right. So,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Unicycle, man.
yeah,
That's awesome.
I sold it 25 years ago for $40 at a garage sale.
Did you really?
So I rode it at a staff retreat
Okay.
about 25 years ago, just
Okay.
for fun.
Yeah.
Because one of the pastors or somebody wanted me to bring it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everybody wanted to try it. So, but if you're going to learn to ride a unicycle, the best place to learn is in a hallway in a building
Yeah. You
inside,
got walls.
especially if it's carpeted.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you might put some
Yeah,
marks
rug
in the
burns.
wall and
Yeah.
what have you. But
Sure.
Anyway,
That's funny. Well, man, thanks for coming back on and
Sure.
sharing a little bit about your time in Southland and a little bit about your family, and then just some of my dumb random questions. It's fun to do that. Our 2 words for today are fearless. And just in case you thought I said fearless, I didn't say that. The 2 words for today are fearless. And you and I talked about a number of topics as we kind of led up to today, and I gave you 3 or 4, and then you came back and you said, hey, I'd say pick some ones that, and so you brought me like 3 or 4. You countered with 3 or 4, and I went, awesome. What do you think? And you like, well, let me think about it. And so I said, well, think about it until lunch and let me know. And so you came back with a totally different topic than all the ones that I had shared and you had shared. And so why did you choose the 2 words fearless? Why'd you choose those?
well, it's funny because I didn't know that wasn't one of the 4 when I told you.
Yeah.
So that maybe the Lord has something to do with that.
That's right. That's right.
So I think everybody wants to. Well, in our day, everybody wants to be fearless.
Yeah, right.
But I think the way to become fearless is to learn incrementally how to fear
Yeah.
less
Yeah.
in lots of different situations. And so rather than determining to become fearless all at once, I think
Yeah.
it's better to break our fears down
Yeah.
and put them in categories and work on them one at a time. And
I love it.
we fear less,
Yeah.
and then we become more fearless when we do. So,
I think men like to say that they're fearless.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know that I know a man that's completely fearless, but I
Yeah.
know that we can become men that fear less and less, right?
Yeah, I think a man who says he's fearless probably lies about other things too.
Yeah, I would agree.
But he probably believes what he
Yeah.
says.
And until,
Everybody's fearless until they meet the thing they're afraid of.
That's right.
And then,
And then it comes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always heard this, that we're born with 2 innate fears, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. And I believe that.
Mhm.
I skydived one time, and I can tell you that fear of falling is for real. Unbelievable. But it doesn't take long for that list to grow, depending on our surroundings and the stuff that comes our way. And I just thought, in preparation for this, I was thinking about phobias. I wonder how many phobias there are. And there are over 500 different phobias that people have that they struggle with, they get gripped by. And back in the day, I mean, we're not quite the same age, but we're in the same similar category. We would have to wait until the nightly news to hear about whatever's going on in our world. And with the birth of social media, our world's gotten super small. And we now are up to date on everything all over the place. Every event, every war, every threat, every headline, every storm, every school shooting, every event happening across our country and our world. It's very unsettling. It feels very different to live in this day than it did growing up. And because of this, if we're not careful, we constantly get pushed back on our heels because we're overloaded with what's going on, the possibilities of what could happen. And we live in a world that has all kinds of things that we potentially could be afraid of, or all kinds of storms that can come our way in an attempt to capsize our boat. And for the high school and college age and young adult and adult men that are checking out the podcast, even those who meet with locker room groups or have conversations with other men, here's the big question for them as we kind of begin to dig this out. The question for our listeners is, what are you afraid of? It's a real question. And it could be a million things. I've just jotted down some things. Fear of acceptance of those that are around them. Fear of measuring up with your parents or your boss or your professors or your coaches, or fear of what's happening after high school. You're in your senior year, and there's so much pressure to try to figure out your life and where am I going to school and what's my major going to be and what am I going to do for the rest. I mean, those are big questions for a 17, 18-year-old. Or do you have a fear of failure? You've been successful in a lot of places and you've worked hard, or you've been a good athlete, or you've made all A's, and there's this weird fear that creeps its way in to try to succeed or achieve. Are there fears that were created in your family of origin? Some of us grew up in some tough places, you and I both, and there's some fears that can reside and stay in us if we're not careful. I see this a lot in our culture. There are these fear of man issues. People become people pleasers, and they're always worried about what other people think. Or maybe you've been in a dating relationship, or maybe you're engaged, or maybe you're getting ready to get married, and as you start thinking about that, your mind starts moving toward fear, like, is she the right one? Am I ready to do this? Maybe you're married and you felt the wind and waves that are beating against your marriage, and you're worried or anxious right now because you're not sure if your marriage is gonna turn around or if it's gonna make it. There's guys that have been in jobs forever, and there's this fear of changing jobs, or this is a big one, fear of the unknown. I mean, if I make this decision, I can just stay in what I know and what's comfortable, but I feel like God's asking me to step out and do something different, and there's a lot of fear of the unknown, and people wrestling like the disciples did in this passage that we're going to walk through, and some of the questions can come up. God, do you see what's going on right now? Are you sleeping? Are you paying attention? I need you, or maybe you've got kids. And every day I pray for safe schools. Because I know what's going on. I pray for not just my kids' safe schools, but I pray for safe schools all over our country. Or maybe you're worried about their friends. Maybe they're starting to date someone, and man, dating is deep water, and that creates some real fear. And are they going to make good decisions? Are they going to, when they're not with us, are they going to make good choices? And maybe you've got kids that are prodigal sons and daughters, and they walk with Jesus for a long time, and now they're kind of on the run, and your heart hurts for them, and you're believing that, maybe God can do something, but they're believing everything that culture throws at them instead of God's word. They seem to be tied to everything else on social media and beliefs and all these philosophies that are out there. Or maybe you're older and you're about to retire and you're fearful of what's on the other side of retirement. Or maybe you're in the middle of a health scare. You're waiting on some results, or fear kind of abounds. Or maybe you're in the middle of some conflict with somebody and you're just not sure how it's going to end up or how it's going to be resolved. Or maybe you're stuck battling addiction, or the enemy just pounces on you on a daily basis to keep you stuck, keep you afraid. You're fearful of reaching out for help. You're fearful of taking any steps. You're fearful of the hard work of sobriety. Maybe it's this unrelenting shame that suffocates you. You're fearful of being honest and sharing with some trusted people in your life. What would they think of me? Would they think less of me? And your shame keeps you locked in fear, even though pushing past those fears and taking steps and all those things move toward healing and freedom and hope. Maybe it's a traumatic thing that happened in your past, and it seemed to have its slimy fingers around you. Maybe you're just afraid of dying. I don't know. But there are all kinds of fears. Locker room, what is the fear that's eating your lunch? What is it that makes your heart beat really fast? What is it that keeps you up at night? What are you fixated on? What is robbing you of peace and joy? And so,
let me interject something there. One of the things you mentioned there was maybe it's a prodigal.
Yeah.
And for those who are listening, I would want to say that Adam and Eve were prodigals.
Yeah.
And God knows how it feels.
Yeah.
So You know, there's a good book years ago I read by John White called Parenting with Pain, and it was subtitled Dealing with the Pain of a Prodigal.
I love that.
So it just popped into my head, so
Yeah.
I just wanted to share it.
Yeah. You said, hey, listen.
God was the perfect parent.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
And,
Luke 15 is,
yeah.
is that reminder for all
So,
of us. That
yeah.
father, oftentimes we spend so much time thinking about the son
Yeah.
and what he's going through and where
Yeah.
he is and how he blows all of his money. But, man, there's a father that
Yeah.
is relentlessly expectant and prayerful. And when he sees that, he's longing for his son to come home. And that's God. That's who God is. And so that's a good reminder for all of us. So you said, hey, let's dig out this passage. And so
Yeah.
I'll read it. And this might be worth, if you're listening, you might want to write some notes today. This one might be one of those ones where you go, I probably need to capture some of these things that we're talking about. I love where we're going, but it's Matthew 8:18, and then verse 23 through 27. And I'll just read it and we can talk about it. But it says, Jesus saw the crowds around him. He gave orders to cross on the other side of the lake, and then he got up into the boat, and the disciples followed him. And then it says in verse 24, suddenly a furious storm came on the lakes so that the waves swept over the boat. And then it says, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him up, saying, Lord, save us, we're going to drown. And he replied, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? And then Jesus got up and he rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. And the men were amazed, and they asked this question, what kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him. He just healed a bunch of people. The crowds are swarming. His ministry's ramping up. He has spent time speaking to, caring for, healing people, and the crowds are just coming in on him. And Jesus just knows it's time for them to go. He tells the disciples they need to jump in the boat, and they need to go get across the lake because God's got something else there for them. And they jump in this fishing boat, and they get moving on the water. And as soon as they start to cross this lake, this ferocious storm starts raging. I mean, rain's dumping, waves are strong, it's battering the boat, waves are pounding into their vessel. Some of these guys are fishermen, and so they've been in storms.
Yeah.
They know choppy water, they know hard rain, and these dudes are scared to death. And then we notice these 4 words in verse 24, which I love, and you highlighted this to me, but it says, but Jesus was sleeping. And I'll be honest, I'm jealous of how good Jesus sleeps here.
Yeah.
I'm the worst sleeper. But that boat is taking a beating, and Jesus is sleeping like a happy baby. And then you even mentioned this. Mark's gospel tells this story that he added some additional details that Mark says that Jesus was asleep on a cushion in the stern of the boat. And it's a fishing boat. The stern's in the back of the boat. Jesus is asleep on this little cushion, this little alcove, in this little cubbyhole. And you mentioned this to me, and I think this is really cool. This is the only time in the Gospels, in the Bible, where we see Jesus sleeping. That's interesting, right? I mean, we see Jesus doing all kinds of things, teaching, connecting with people, praying, serving, healing, weeping, suffering, dying. This is the only time where we see Jesus sleeping. And again, the disciples are freaking out. They go run toward Jesus. Save us! This boat's going down. We're going to drown. And Jesus gets up and he rebukes the wind and the waves. And the word rebuke, it means to reprimand, to strongly warn, to restrain. And in the snap of a finger, the storm is stilled, the winds stop, the boat stops rocking, and the waves cease. And there's no ripple, no wind, no waves. All of a sudden, the lake becomes like glass, like this swimming pool that no one's in the morning. And it communicates the authority of Jesus. He tells the storm to go away, and it obeys. And the disciples, you said this, the disciples might have been more freaked out about that even before the storm that they were in.
D.A. Carson, in his book on this story, he talks about how he says the wind and the waves suddenly were as placid as the calm seas, the glassy seas of Galilee. And his point is that immediately, 1 second after he said, be still, it was tranquil.
Yeah, it's not like our kids.
Like an early morning pond,
when
you go out to fish or whatever.
Yeah, the waves don't argue.
Yeah, right.
They just respond.
Yeah, it's good.
And then before he actually does that, he responds to these disciples that are freaking out. He says, you of little faith, why are you so afraid? And I think, in some ways, if you think about that, Gary, it's like there's, in some parts I go, that question seems pretty insensitive. And then in other respects, I think that question is completely appropriate. The question seems insensitive because they're in a storm, and they're in a storm that they haven't felt ever. It's huge, and they're fearing for their lives. They don't want to drown, and yet the other side of that, Jesus says, "You have little faith. Why are you so afraid?" It seems fitting because the guy in the boat with them is God.
Yeah.
He's God incarnate. He's the King of Kings. He's the ultimate authority. Just as in Genesis, when Jesus spoke creation into existence, creatio ex nihilo, Jesus spoke everything that we see into existence, including lakes and rivers and oceans. And Jesus is also the one who can command the things that he created. He can tell them what to do. He can tell a river to go the opposite way.
Yeah.
And he tells this storm to stop, and it does. He demonstrates in this passage his authority over creation. You have little faith, why are you so afraid? I think that question is not just a question that he asked for the disciples. I think it's a question for us and for all of our listeners. I believe it's a question that all of us should wrestle with, because fear is not something that's going to be conquered in a moment. It's not like, hey, here's fear, we conquer it, it's over, we never have to deal with it, and we move on. Fear just keeps coming. And it comes in so many different waves, like the pounding of these waves. Fear comes in a number of ways, in a number of forms, in a vast number of scenarios, and even seasons in our life, all the time. And so, Gary, obviously this topic is really personal to you, because you wouldn't choose a topic that wasn't. And so why don't you mind sharing a little bit about just kind of even some seasons or some places in your life where you've wrestled and fear's got a hold of you?
Yeah, well, a couple stories come to mind. One was my first sermon. I never knew that I was afraid of public speaking until I actually did it.
It's a big fear. Yeah.
It was an unmitigated disaster. I was 17, took four friends with me, high school friends, and my sociology teacher, who's also our weightlifting coach, Bob Bishop.
Yeah, this is a guy who had a big impact in your life.
Who was mentoring me at the time, and he set the whole thing up at Baptist Church, East Louisville, Sunday night, 40 people present. My friends and Bob sat in the front row.
Yeah.
The pulpit's like 8 feet from the front row.
And,
and so I practiced a sermon for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Had it memorized. The title of the sermon was "Turn or Burn." I kid you not. I'm not making this up.
Yeah.
It's a Baptist church. You got to remember.
Oh, that's right up their alley.
Yeah. So anyway, I wore glasses at the time. Started preaching. Sweat began to roll down my forehead under my glasses. Couldn't see my notes. Good thing I had it memorized.
Yeah.
Sweat was dripping on the notes on the pulpit. And when I practiced it, it came out 22 minutes. When I preached it, it came out 12.
You're like an auctioneer up there.
I was like, I just want to get out of here.
Yeah.
So none of my friends said a word afterwards.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to go home, forget it ever happened.
Yeah.
No more public speaking for me, I vowed as we drove out of the parking lot that night.
Isn't that funny?
God had some other plans.
Yeah.
But another time that I was very fearful is when I went to the doctor back in July 2011, had some tests, and some of them came back abnormal. He sent me to a urologist.
Okay.
And the second doctor discovered 2 tumors in my bladder, and he said that he suspected they were both cancerous, but I have to get in there and,
Figure
whatever.
it out.
So 2 days later, had surgery. He was right about the cancer. 18 months of treatment. And, at times it was just all terrifying.
Yeah.
But, God in His grace gave me peace and carried me through. 12 years later, I'm still cancer-free. But awesome. I don't ever take one single day for granted. It's all a gift. It's all a gift. And then I wonder, I've buried so many people with cancer that were younger than me. Yeah. And now pretty much everybody's younger than me. Buried 3 people this year in their 40s in cancer, with cancer.
Wow.
And, why me?
Yeah.
The better question is why them?
Yeah.
None of us deserve anything, but we'll know the answers when we get to heaven. But in the meantime, it's all grace.
Certainly.
I'm one of the ones that up to this point, is still cancer-free.
You mentioned having panic attacks too.
Oh, yeah.
Different
yeah.
times. Has there been something in particular that's brought that on, or just different moments, or?
Well, I went to several different doctors with, dealing with panic attacks.
Yeah.
And they all had different opinions. And some of them said it was, you just have to, get good counseling and work
Yeah.
through it, talk through it,
Yeah.
which is important.
Yeah.
Others said, no, it's organic and, need to give you a prescription, put me on beta blockers,
Mm-hmm.
try to make my body slow down.
Yeah.
Here's the thing about fear, in my opinion, and if anybody's had a panic attack, they'll definitely agree with this.
Yeah.
The greatest of all fears is the fear of fear,
Yeah.
the fear of being afraid.
Yeah.
Because when we're afraid, we feel like we're out of control.
Yeah.
And a person who's had a panic attack fears having a panic attack.
Right.
And that's one of the difficulties of
Yeah.
getting beyond it, is the fear of having another one
Yeah.
that comes on unexpectedly, suddenly, and so on. But
Yeah.
anyway, it's real.
Yeah.
Fear is real, and it's not something to be ashamed of or
Yeah.
apologetic about.
Yeah.
So
No, it's good. Couple for me, as I was thinking about that question for you. We had similar probably families growing up a little bit. My parents, they fought all the time, and I didn't notice it until I was in fourth grade. I don't know if they were just good at it or there wasn't conflict before, but from fourth grade on, it was game on, and it continued to escalate from disagreements to arguments to yelling to throwing to all out war. And I remember just feeling gripped by it when I was a kid. I didn't know what to do. I was kind of just stunned. I didn't know whether I should do anything or try to get in the middle of them or run or leave. Or I just was paralyzed. And I talk about this a lot in Fight Club, and I won't get into it here, but really from fourth grade through high school, I lived with a bunch of years with crippling fear, and fear that ate away at me for a very long time. And in fact, I kind of became a shell of a person because of what had been going on, and no one knows how to. I mean, you're trying to figure out emotionally how to connect the dots to what's going on in your life. Period. Even if it's easy, but when it's hard, it's even more overwhelming to try to figure that out. And so I dealt with worry a lot. I worried when I was at school. I worried when I got home. I worried when my dad walked through the door after work. I worried when I wasn't home. It was a long battle for me to process and overcome. And another big event, and I think you probably have felt this too, because you didn't grow up in church, that type of thing. But when God called me into full-time ministry, I really felt like Moses when God showed up, in a burning bush to tell Moses to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let God's people go. I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel capable. I didn't feel like God would use someone like me. And I had this sting of insecurity and fear that even though I knew that God was calling me, I just didn't feel like I think he made a mistake, And then there's been a ton of other things, but I'll just share one more. When I left here in 2006 to go plant a church in the Pacific Northwest, I knew God had called me there. We had spent probably 14 months kind of processing through that. Our church was kind to just pray for me and try to help me figure out kind of what that looked like. And then I'm in this process of raising money, raising support, and I'm talking to different churches and people, and I end up at this church where I'm sitting in front of their church planting committee or their missions committee, and they want to know about my family. They want to know why we're going to Seattle to plant this church. And this meeting really determined whether or not they were going to financially support me. So the stakes were kind of high. It was an important meeting. And I remember at one point, after kind of walking through our story and what God's done in my life and our family's life and all this stuff, the question was, what are you afraid of? And it didn't take me any time. I just said, I'm afraid of failing. I don't want to move there to do that. 50% of church plants fail. I mean, there's a long cemetery filled with church planters that they start something, they believe in something, God calls them to something, they don't make it. And I'm afraid of going out there where 6% of people would say that they're a Christ follower. And in my ministry, up until that point, and it had been, it'd been 12 years, had only been really successful. I mean, God, and again, only God, but with the right people and trying to do the right things and seeing things grow, seeing people accept Christ as their Lord and Savior, watching people grow and be transformed, seeing things change has been awesome. But what if I move my family there and it doesn't go well? I mean, what if we move 2,500 miles away to start Resonate Church and it fails, And at that moment, and it really many, many moments in living in Seattle, the weight of responsibility was overwhelming. I really had to process the fears I had growing up. And for the most part, I'd really dealt with those. But all of a sudden, this new season of fear really showed up. What if we start this church and nobody shows up? What if we can't find staff that we need to move to Seattle? What if we can't raise the money that we need to start this? What if we can't build a strong launch team to help us get these ministries up off the ground? What if we can't find a place to meet in on the weekends for church? We're going to have to rent something. Will anybody rent to us? What if we can't build enough critical mass? What if we reach people with the gospel, but they're unwilling to financially give in a way that helps us manage the ministry and our annual budget? That's what our church planters that we're supporting here, that's what they wrestle with all the time. What if after 3 to 5 years, after our external givers finish their commitments, and we can't pay the bills and do ministry with the lack of generosity of commitments to those that are brand new in Christ that are attending our church? It was hard, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I really, after my family and after the Lord kind of got a hold of me and I processed that, I really didn't deal with major bouts of worry, but man, I worried. Worried a lot. And, and those 7 years I was in and out of worry and going, hey, God, do you have this? Do you have me? And God would go, hey, man, this is my church. I'm building it. You just do what you need to do. And just that wrestling match. We shared some of our own stories and seasons that dominated us, and sometimes have gotten the best of us. But before we leave that point, anything that jumps out in your mind as you're thinking about just our stories together and the fear that we...
Yeah, the one thing after I got the cancer diagnosis, the one thing that comes to mind, I went back to my car. I went by myself.
I was wondering that.
I didn't want Linda to have to deal with that if it's what I thought it might be.
Right.
And she graciously agreed. But anyway, I got back to the car and I sat there for a while, reflected on everything, and then I felt like in my spirit I heard the Lord say Romans 15:13. And I had no idea what that verse said, so I looked it up on my phone, and it says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, and may you overflow with hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. And that was my verse, and I had it put on a 3-by-3 foot plaque. It hangs on the wall in my office to this day.
Okay.
I read it every day. And I found it to be 100% true. And
say it again, Romans 15:13.
15:13, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, and may you overflow with hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. So it's been a life verse for me ever since, and in more ways than one. So
I love how God just prompts you with stuff, and you're going, I don't know what that is. And there are moments in my life where I'm like, am I supposed to know it? Can I look it up? Is that okay? And then he just drops truth and encouragement and hope. He just knows what we need. So we're never far from talking about the enemy when it comes to locker room. He's always trying to full court press men in an effort to stop the work of God in their lives. And so as you think about the enemy, how does he use fear to hijack men's stories and hijack their spiritual growth? How do you see that happening?
Well, I think men are afraid to be afraid, just like anyone else. And because we don't talk about being afraid or admit that we are, we just try to put up a front and hope nobody notices.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, spend all our time trying to be strong, which is exhausting.
Flexing the whole time and
which means that we don't ever really learn how to face our fears and overcome them.
That's good.
So first step to overcoming any fear is to admit that you have it. It all begins with being honest with yourself and with others. takes courage to win the battle with fear. But courage is the thing we often lack.
Yeah.
And so we feel judged because we struggle with it. So we just play it safe. We do a lot of pretending, hope no one notices.
Yeah.
I've heard it said we're only as sick as our secrets.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree with that. And only we can change that. And it all starts with just being gut level honest about it. Tell somebody.
Yeah.
Share it. You know, you deal with this with Fight Club all the time.
Yeah.
So.
It's funny when you say that. I remember Nickel telling me we were having a conversation about men, and he was talking about his own life. And I don't know if he had been in a counseling appointment or with a counselor, or he'd just been having a conversation with one. But he said, there are times where I don't even know how to feel. I'm not sure what that feeling is.
Yeah.
And then the counselor said, it's fear.
Yeah. And
so when we are not sure how to kind of put a finger on it and identify what it is, there's a really good chance that it's fear, And so I see fear abound in men all the time. I see men fearful to jump into a group, jump into accountability or community. I see men fearful to reach out and request a counselor. I see men so beaten up by addiction, and I meet with them and I try to help them, really just trying to listen and trying to bring a lot of empathy and compassion, and I try to share a little bit of my story and just, hey, I'm no different. I bleed just like you, and try to help them figure out what their next steps are. And some of those steps might be to just jump. Hey, man, come and be a part of our weekends, or I'd love for you to jump into a group, be a part of a group, or hey, we've got AA at Lexington and Nicholasville Campus every week. We'd love for you to come. Or hey, here's how you can get a counselor, a Christian counselor, a good one. And I tell them that, and inherently they probably know what they need to do, but they're too fearful of taking those steps. They're fearful of growing, moving toward the hard places of the struggle. They're fearful of going to war with their addiction. And you spent some time in preparation for this episode in an effort to help men fight against fear. And once I kind of read your notes, I went, yeah, we need to do that, because fear has been bullying people for far too long, and fear bullies men all the time, and it's an emotion. To resist fear is really about the decisions that we make to not be overcome by it. And you shared 3 decisions with me, and I think these are worth us writing down, that allowed you to push back on fear and to live by faith and be resilient. So why don't you start and tell us the first one?
Well, thank you for the opportunity. The first for me was to stop catastrophizing.
Okay.
And I mean by that we practice what I call catastrophic thinking.
Yep.
You go to the doctor, get an exam. He says, hey, how long have you had that knot under your arm? What? I didn't know I had a knot under my arm. He says, well, you do. We're going to have to check it out, maybe do a biopsy. Let me have you come back a week from tomorrow.
Yeah.
So the whole week,
all
you think about is a knot under your arm. And you mentioned the 2 words, what if? Fear is usually preceded by those 2 words. What if it's cancer? What if it's stage 4? What if it's spread throughout my body? What if it's untreatable? What if they tell me I've only got 3 months left to live? What if it destroys me financially? What if I die, leave nothing for my family? The mind is a curious thing. My mother used to talk about worrying ourselves sick, and I never knew what she meant by that until I became a young adult and learned how to do it. And but I was reading an article in the New York Times about the worry gene. Scientists say they've identified a worry gene as a technical name, SLC6A4, chromosome 17q12. I'm not making this up. But people who have this particular gene seem especially prone to worry.
Okay.
So some of our listeners right now just started worrying about whether they have the gene
I've got it.
or not. They're going to sit down tonight and research it.
Right.
And some are already saying, what if?
Right.
So we do this socially. What if they don't like me? What if they think I'm boring? What if they think I'm weird? They probably will think I'm weird. They'll probably tell people. It'll ruin my reputation. No one will want to be my friend anymore ever again. I may as well just dig a hole and jump in, save them the trouble. Like Jesus' disciples in the boat, Lord, save us. It's all going down right here, right now. It's over. But I love the fact that he didn't. I don't think he rebuked them harshly. I think he said, hey, why are you afraid?
Yeah.
'Cause you don't have to be.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I am in the boat,
Yeah.
and storms are outranked when I'm in the boat.
Yeah.
And so I told you we were going to the other side.
That's right. That's right. You said that.
So, I didn't say we're all going to drown in the middle of the
Right.
lake. So
Right.
what's with all the catastrophic thinking? That's kind of my take on that conversation. So,
Yeah.
so I made a decision several years ago to stop catastrophizing about everything, especially scary things. I traded in my crisis mentality for a single Bible verse, Psalm 112, verse 7. The righteous will have no fear of bad news. Their hearts are steadfast, trusting in the Lord.
That's good.
And so over the years, I've enjoyed that verse and quoted it so many times. It's not really a verse anymore. It's more of a mindset, a lifestyle.
Yeah.
So we got to stop our catastrophic thinking. We'll never get off the mat if we don't.
Yeah.
So,
That's right. I love that.
so
It is amazing how fear can grow in our minds. The boogeyman just gets bigger and bigger
Yeah.
and bigger. Anxiety and fear are cousins. They're not twins. Fear can see a threat. Anxiety imagines one. And as you said, what if? What if just becomes a part of our story? And before too long, we've written this narrative. We created this whole story in our minds because we've catastrophized. And the reality is a huge amount of the stuff that we fixate about, worry about, get all anxious about, most of it never happens, most
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
But worry starts to dominate and shrink our faith. And I love what you said. You had to decide. You made a decision to trade catastrophic thinking for what might happen for God's truth. And you just decided that you were going to lean into his word and you were going to trust him.
yeah.
The presence of anxiety is often unavoidable. There's not
Right.
a lot we can do about it. It's a feeling.
Every soldier that goes into battle is afraid.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the prison of anxiety is optional. We don't have to stay
Yeah.
in that. We've got to choose to be grounded in who God says he is and grounded with the truth of God's word in our lives. And so that first point's awesome. Walk us through your second decision that you made.
By the way, in the first point, one of the things I learned to do is just, instead of say, what if,
Yeah.
I would add the word so
Yeah.
before it.
Okay.
So what if?
So what if?
So
Yeah.
what if it happens?
Yeah.
So what if it,
Yeah.
and that helped. But anyway, second decision I made was just to get closer to Jesus.
Yeah.
And I don't know what others might have done that night in the boat, but I think I would have gone back to where Jesus was. And,
Shook him.
I would just get really close to him, look at his face,
Yeah.
see if he's worried, see if he's at peace. If he's at peace, I can be at peace.
Yeah.
I've learned now that it's better sometimes to be with Jesus in a storm
Mm-hmm.
than without Jesus any day, anytime, anywhere in the world.
That's a
You know,
big
so,
statement. Yeah.
But anyway, I can say with confidence that I've got Jesus for this.
Yeah.
And that's another little thing I self-talk to myself about. I've got Jesus for this. And
Yeah.
I can lean in,
Yeah.
experience his presence, his peace, even in a scary situation.
Not alone.
Yeah. So I think life storms somehow make us lose sight of all the things that matter
Yeah.
the most,
Yeah.
including Jesus. And if I had to reach a place in my life where I just took him at his word,
Yeah.
where I just believe that he pays for what he orders. And if he said he'd get me to the other side, he'll get me to the other side.
Yeah.
And so peace isn't the absence of storms. Peace is the presence
Right.
of Jesus. There's a big,
Right.
big difference.
Yeah.
So anyway, get closer to Jesus. Sounds simplistic, but it's actually not.
Right.
It takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. You told a story about, you were telling me a story about Elisha and the servant. Do you remember that? Just went
Yeah.
on the hillside.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, there was an army coming against him, and
Yeah.
the servant went out and saw it and went back and told Elijah
Yeah.
about the army. And, there's no way you could write the script for that.
Sure.
The conversation had to be like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But Elisha said, Lord, give him eyes, open his eyes so he can
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
So he could see. And then he said, when he did, he saw that greater is he who is with us than he is with them. He saw God's warring angels in the heavenly realms. And
got a view. The curtain
yeah,
is pulled back.
yeah, the big picture view.
Yeah.
And we need that sometimes, I think.
Yeah,
for sure.
no doubt. Interesting, peace isn't the absence of storms, it's the presence of Jesus, and I think we can lose sight. I think we allow the view of our circumstances to cloud our view of Jesus, and whether it's an addiction or it's a call in the middle of the night or it's cancer or our job is on the line, we start seeing just those things and not, it almost like it eclipses the view that we have of Jesus, and if we're not careful, that's what happens, and we forget his power and his authority and his promises that he's going to walk with us and that he has ultimate authority. And when fear abounds, we just got to choose to draw close to him. A couple weeks ago, I took some guys to you mentioned Red River Gorge. We went to the gorge about a month ago, and we just got away for the weekend. 4 of us guys. It was awesome. We hiked, did all kinds of stuff, just got to know each other more, hung out together, played cards, all kinds of stuff. But the first night, and our reception was pretty bad. Like our phones weren't working really, really good. And eventually I got a text from my wife saying that Everly my daughter wanted me to FaceTime her because she was scared. And, I'm thinking, well, we're not that far away. It's not raining. There's no threat of thunder or there's no tornado warning or anything like that. What was the issue? And the issue was I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And Everly knew it. And you see, Everly understands that the importance of me being there. She knows how much I love her. She knows that I would do anything to protect and provide for her.
Yeah.
And in my absence, it created these insecure feelings. And she wanted to see my face, and she wanted to hear my voice, and she needed my reassurance. And I think the same is true with us.
Yeah.
When fear comes crashing our story, we got to be reminded, or we need to remind ourselves that we have a powerful, loving Heavenly Father, and He's always with us. He never leaves us. We have to move toward Him with our fear. And we need to trust Him because He's enough, So,
well, if you don't move toward Him, where are you going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned something earlier. It was like, you made me think about something. It's like when I've been on flights before and we have turbulence.
Yeah.
Immediately, what I do is I look at the stewardess. I look at those people that work for the airlines.
Yeah.
And
if they're calm, you're calm.
Yeah, you go, you know what? And maybe they're good actors and actresses. I don't know, but I go, they're in this all the time. And they don't look like they're freaking out. And so I guess I don't need to freak out. And same with Elisha, same with our story too. God is not up in heaven going, oh my gosh, Gary's got cancer.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this guy's battling addiction. Oh my gosh, this guy just lost his job. He's not freaking out. And so when we can get our eyes set on him.
Yeah, sure.
And he's not stressed out about it, we can go, you know what, he knows.
Yeah.
He's the God who knows, and so I think that matters. What's your third big decision that you made in the face of fear that you practice often in your life?
Well, to remember the resurrection.
Yeah.
So people are probably listening right now and saying, well, what's the resurrection got to do? That's like a preacher who wants to talk about Easter,
Mm-hmm.
But the answer is it has to do more with fear than we ever perhaps have thought. But Jesus' disciples didn't conquer their fear that night when He calmed the waves.
That's right.
They didn't conquer it when they saw Him heal people. They didn't conquer it when they saw Him cast out demons or raise Lazarus from the grave. And there were some reprieves along the way where they did conquer their fear. But after following Him for 3 years, seeing His miracles, hearing His sermons, all the podcasts, Bible studies, Bible apps, YouTube downloads, they're still afraid.
Yeah.
It's read it right. It's in the Scripture. They all bolted the night He was arrested.
That's right.
Even Peter, the rock, swore with an oath that I never met the guy.
Yeah.
And only John, along with Jesus' mother, came to the crucifixion.
Yeah.
And the rest of them were hiding out in a house somewhere over in Jerusalem.
Scared
and
to
so, remember the Easter morning, the first people who came to the tomb wasn't His disciples.
No.
2 women.
Women.
Both named Mary.
Yeah.
And when they discovered the tomb was empty, they ran and told the disciples. Here was the disciples' response. Mark 16:11, when they heard it, that He was alive and had been seen by Mary, they did not believe. So we don't preach on that.
No.
But
Yeah.
I'm glad it's there. I mean, I
Thank God for
need to
women.
read that when
Yeah.
I'm feeling guilty about my doubts. I need to know their doubts.
Yeah.
And when I'm scared, even after all these years of following Jesus, I need to know that. So
Yeah.
Peter and John eventually did go to the tomb that day, but even then they ran back to their hideout. They locked the doors. They huddled with the others. They were like a bunch of Girl Scouts listening to scary stories around an evening campfire.
Sure.
So what changed them?
Yeah.
What changed them?
Yeah.
They saw the living Christ.
Yeah.
The resurrection was the ultimate game changer, still is.
Yeah.
John said, we saw him with our own eyes and touched him with our own hands. He is the word of life, not death.
Yeah.
He also wrote, Jesus came and stood among them.
Yeah.
And I take that to mean that he instantly appeared in the middle of the room, which surely scared the scaredy cats to death.
Absolutely. Freak those dudes out.
Which is why his first words were these. He said to them, peace,
Yeah.
peace be with you.
Yeah.
So there's this connection between peace and the presence of Jesus. And so Jesus said, and I am with you always,
Yeah.
even to the end of the world. So here's the point. When you come to the book of Acts, you don't ever find these guys being afraid of anything
They're
again.
different.
Yeah. Why? Jesus was alive, and they knew it.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, they figured if he can conquer the grave,
Yeah.
that he can handle every single storm in my life.
Yeah.
And that's true for us too.
Yeah. It's Easter.
The Bible says he'll never leave us or forsake us. He's alive on both sides of all our problems all the time.
Yeah.
So, he's alive.
Yeah.
It is the message that changes the world.
Romans 8, it says that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead lives in us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he didn't give us a spirit of fear, timidity, but a spirit of power. And I think we just lose sight at times. And I think the empty tomb really is our trump card when it comes to fear.
Yeah.
Resurrection gives us so much more confidence to know that Jesus does love us.
Yes.
So much. And he's come, he's taken on flesh, he's lived a perfect life. He came to tell the world about God's love for them, and then to finish the mission of this rescue story. He laid down his life. He took our place. He paid our price. And he died this horrific death on the cross so that we wouldn't have to be afraid of sin's impact in our lives. He took care of that.
Yeah.
He took care of death. And not only that, he did what he told them that he would do. He said he would rise 3 days later. He'd been telling them that. They were confused along the way. And, it's interesting that you mentioned, 3 days later,
Yeah.
there's two women, two Marys that have been impacted by Jesus that believed him, and they didn't allow fear to jack with them, and they came. And but they would take Jesus off the cross. They would put him in a borrowed tomb. They would roll a stone in front of it. They would guard it with Roman guards. Jesus was dead. No beating heart, no blood pumping through his body, no brain activity, dead. And then 3 days later, the first Easter Sunday morning, Jesus would get up from the grave and crush the last thing that most people fear, which is death.
Yeah.
The empty tomb declares that death has no hold on us, that he's defeated the grave. And so whatever we go through, and whatever storms come our way, big or small, whatever waves come slamming into our boat, man, we're not alone. And locker room, we got
Preach it, brother. Preach it.
We get to worship and serve and get connected to a conquering king, that it's enough. He's enough for us. And he's a good God. And he either does this, and this, and there's so many passages that we won't even dig into today, but he either takes a storm away like he did in that moment, or he'll just grab our hands and he'll walk with us through it, dripping wet. That's how good Jesus is.
Yeah.
Providing the power of his presence, and ultimately one day, no matter what comes our way, one day our faith will be sight. And we got to stop allowing fear to bully us. And Gary, the simplicity of what you just said, we had to make a decision to stop catastrophizing. We got to stop saying all this what if we start building these narratives that
Yes.
mostly never happen. And from there, we got to get close to Jesus. We can bring our doubts to him. I love the fact that there's this passage where, he's asking Jesus for a healing of his daughter, and he goes, I believe, and he goes, I believe, but help me believe. It's like we can bring that to him as well. We just bring all that we are to him. because where else are we going to go?
Yeah.
And he'll be enough for us. And then the third part of this that I think is critical that we should remind ourselves every day is that listen, Good Friday's important. I mean, sin was taken care of in that moment. But that first Easter Sunday is critical, because if he never rose,
We got nothing.
none of this matters.
We
are
got nothing.
wasting our time.
Yeah.
And as Paul says, your faith is a waste too. But he's
Yeah.
conquered the grave. And because of that, we can live victorious. We don't have to cower in fear. And we sang this worship song this weekend, and it's called The Battle Belongs by Phil Wickham. And this worship song just reminds us of the hope that you talked about in Romans 15:13 and the proximity of Jesus in and out of every single battle that we go through. And I'll just read the first verse and second verse in the chorus, and then you share with me just what sticks out to you, what resonates with you. But the first verse says, when all I see is the battle, you see my victory. When all I see is the mountain, you see a mountain moved. And as I walk through the shadow, your love surrounds me. There's nothing to fear now, for I am safe with you. Verse 2, and if you are for me, who can be against me? For Jesus, there's nothing impossible for you. When all I see are the ashes, you see the beauty. And when all I see is a cross, God, you see the empty tomb. And then the chorus says, and when I fight, I'll fight on my knees with my hands lifted high. Oh God, the battle belongs to you. And every fear, I lay at your feet. And I'll sing through the night, oh God, the battle belongs to you. What sticks out to you, grounds you about this song and empowers you just in the midst of fears that come your way?
Well, as I've said, when you got to fight one more round. You can't win if you quit.
Yeah.
And so, the song is about hope.
Yeah.
When all see is ashes, you see the beauty.
Yeah.
All see is a cross, you see the empty tomb. Goes right along with what we just talked about. The other thing I see in this song is the presence. He is the risen Lord.
Yeah.
And he's as close to you as your next breath.
Yeah.
And we mustn't ever forget that. There's a song that people used to sing back in the old days in church. No, never alone, never alone. He promised never to leave me, never to leave me alone. So if that's not true, we may as well all line up for the high windows.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
I believe it.
Yeah.
And I stake my life on it, and I know you do too.
Yeah. In a culture that seems to just be residing with fear, and social media that wants to try to, it's like the news. News either creates something that's fearful or something that makes us angry. In a world where we have an enemy that he's a terrorist. He wants to create fear. He wants to drain us of our courage. Jesus and our faith in him is what helps us move through the fears that we experience to navigate difficult circumstances. We only do that with faith. We only do that with faith. And I love what Paul says, Romans 8:31 and 32. And it's really kind of out of that song. It says, what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? And, if God's for us, if he's really for us, then what do we have to worry about? And I think about the context of this scripture, because it's Romans,
Right.
These are new believers in new churches in the epicenter of the most dominant empire of that time in the known world. And Rome wanted the world to fear, and in a culture that was pretty anti-Jesus and anti-Christianity, Paul reminds them that Jesus is bigger than the shadow of the Roman Empire. And Paul says some really powerful things in verse 32. It says, talking about God who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for all of us, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? It's like if you lay down your son, John, you just lay down his life for me, and I needed something. Would you go, you've laid down one of the most important things in your life, and so if I needed something, that just qualifies the fact that man, the answer is yes. What do you need? I'm here for you. And that's what Paul is trying to drive into these early believers, and even drive into us, that we got to stop letting fear bully us. It's time to move toward it with God's word and God's spirit and God's son that lives in us. And you and I were talking about Gordon the other day before
Yeah.
all this, and he's one of the best dudes on our church.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's awesome.
he's unbelievable, and I don't know what that is, but he constantly, I've heard him say this multiple times around fear. He constantly brings that up, and he wants to encourage and challenge our staff, and he asked this question: what would you do if you weren't afraid? And that's a huge question. I mean, locker room, those of you listening, what would you do if you weren't afraid? You know, what action would you take? What conversations would you have? What invitation would you extend? What changes would you make? What dreams would you chase? What risk would you take?
Yeah.
And I love that question so much because I think deep down underneath all of the fear and anxiety and worry in our lives are some dreams and some callings and some actions that we didn't step toward.
Yeah.
We didn't pick up. We got to dust them off and stuff that God's calling us to uncover and go after and step towards because we didn't because of fear.
Yeah.
What would you do if you weren't afraid? And then I love Gordon's response. Three words.
Do it afraid.
Do it afraid,
I know,
man.
I've heard him say that many times.
Do it afraid. You know, push past the awkward, move toward it, step out in faith and see what God does and see how Jesus shows up.
Yeah.
Trust the Holy Spirit. Go have the conversation. Move toward the hard places in your marriage or with your kids or with your parents.
Yeah.
God's calling you towards something. You say this a lot, and I love this quote. God pays for what he orders. Yeah. If he's calling you to do something, he's going to provide you with what you need to do it. And we can trust him, and we can put action to our faith. So resurrect the dream, man. Try something. Invite somebody. Sign up for something that freaks you out. Take risk grounded in faith, and just watch what Jesus does. Yeah. I believe most of the things in our lives that we really want or that we long to experience are on the other side of fear. So we just got to push past it and move toward it, you know. Yeah. And so we'll wrap up. But before we do, anything else that you want to say? Because listen, I know you think about all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of things that go through your mind. But anything else that you want to challenge us with?
Yeah, one thing that did come to my mind is we say I can't.
Yeah.
And God says we will.
Yeah.
And you know, you don't have to do it by yourself.
I can't, but he says we will.
We will.
Yeah.
We will. I'm here.
Yeah.
We're a team. But the other thing that I think I would maybe say here is that the victorious Christian life isn't all sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
And we need to admit that.
Yeah.
And in fact, sometimes the victorious Christian life barely being able to hold your nose above the water.
Absolutely.
And so let's be honest about that. But here's my admonition. Dear brother, dear sister,
yeah,
keep your nose above the water.
Yeah.
There's daylight on the other side of all darkness.
Eyes up.
And you do get across the sea.
Yeah.
So you're never alone. Press on.
Yeah. Awesome. Dude, I love you. Thankful for you and Linda, your ministry. Your
Likewise.
wisdom. Man, I just want to, I told some guys that you were coming on. They're like, good. I'm so glad. I love getting to have you on, man. It's so fun to get to dig out some stuff and unpack stuff with you.
Well, thanks.
Appreciate your transparency too, and just talking about something that's been hard, you know. I love having your voice on here. I love it because I know that God uses it to impact men. So super grateful for you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Well, that's it, man. 2 words: fear less. If this podcast has encouraged you, I'd love to hear from you. If you're wrestling with Christianity, would like to become a Christ follower, just would like help figuring out your next step, we're here to help. Shoot us an email at lockerroom@southland.church. As always, if this podcast has encouraged you, share it with a friend. I bet there's some people in your life that could use today's episode. So get after it. And as Gordon says, do it afraid.
Yeah.
Go lead out and fight for the most important things. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.